Turkey is now, if we look at the parity level, it's 11th largest economy in the world, 4th in Europe. I think in next less than 10 years, I would expect Turkey to be among the top 10 economies in the world.
Assalamu alaikum salam. Just before we begin, if you support the Young Smirks podcast and you want to help support the channel, please go to the Patreon below and support us monthly so we can keep up with the shows. We've got lots of content coming up. We're going to have special content specifically for the Patreons, as well as a new series on Hijrah, inshallah. So please go to the Patreon below and support the podcast. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Welcome to the Young Smirks podcast. Today I'm with Almir Colan. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. All the way from Bosnia, but all the way from Australia.
Both. I was actually in Bosnia for a couple of days just last week.
We were just saying the mountains remind you of back home, right?
Looks exactly like Sarajevo, like the mountains, the house, the vibe is same.
Alhamdulillah. So, Brother Almir, you was originally born in Bosnia and you moved to Australia. So I wanted to just learn a bit about your early life before we get on to what you're doing now, and how it was growing up in Bosnia and experiencing the war and things like that.
Well, Bosnia was part of Yugoslavia, which is the country that collapsed basically after the turbulent 80s and 90s, which saw the collapse of Berlin Wall, and all of that Cold War rhetoric was coming to the head. The West basically won in the Cold War, and then you had these all East Bloc or Russian-centric bloc collapsing. And country after country were collapsing, and one of them was Yugoslavia. There was a breakdown of that country, and communism was very strongly entrenched there. And unfortunately, when sometimes countries collapse, it does not go down very smoothly. So Serbia was trying to keep that country together by force. Then Slovenia left, Croatia left, there was a big war, and then Bosnia kind of was there as the last country to really leave. There was a lot of tensions and problems, and then we had the war basically in 90. Started in 92, lasted for almost 4 years until the end of 95. I was there, and after the war finished, I went to Australia to study, but as it is, sometimes, you know, you start studying and then you suddenly find yourself living there, and you know, life takes its own course.
Yes, subhanAllah. So how was it, you know, what was some of your experience in the war? I mean, it must have been tragic. You know, I went to Bosnia around 6 years ago. You know, every year they do when they do the janazah for the people that they've identified over that particular year, and it was, you know, learning about the history of Bosnia and the war. It was really traumatic. You know, it must have been very difficult for yourself and your family.
Bosnia was not prepared for the war. Muslims were definitely not prepared. They were not in the military or police or intelligence. They had no idea. I remember as a kid that 92 winter, just before the war is starting, we went skiing on the mountain, and I could see soldiers digging in the trenches, one of them showing me the bullets. I remember we had no idea. Just one morning we woke up, there's soldiers, barricades, they started shelling us. Like you can imagine, we are in Bursa here, and you have like this exactly hills. The Serbs artillery comes to the edge and just start pounding the city. Millions of shells, just anywhere, everywhere. And so obviously growing up there, not an easy, then they put snipers, they shoot at you all the time. So it was the longest. Sarajevo, where I was, where I was born and where I spent the war, that was the longest siege in the modern history of the warfare. But you, as a human, you get used to the war, everything. You get used to it, you push it somewhere behind you, you go on living. And it's an interesting place to visit, I think, for people, because a lot of history, East and West meet
Yeah.
at Sarajevo, a lot of civilization from Ottoman to others. It's a really unique experience to just spend some time there and learn a little bit about history.
How do you think the war helped develop your Muslim identity? Because from what I've learned of the history, it's like at the time people didn't really understand that you're being attacked for being Muslim, basically, and it's like a lot of people found the religion after the war.
So what happened before that? Just before war, maybe let's say a decade before that, Muslims were kind of awakening. You would have called young Muslims group who were working on the Muslims to awaken themselves. One of the most influential people, our late President Ali Izetbegovic, may Allah have mercy on his soul, he would write books, and for which he was jailed. And if you read the books at that time, they were talking about Islamic identity, about history, about things that happened in the past, and some of the lessons. And so he was actually in prison for just writing the books. There was a big trial process. Leading up to the war, people were finding that identity, and I guess there was some kind of awakening already happening.
Okay.
War, trauma, that sort of intensity. When you see a death every day, people being shot, you don't know what's happening. That's uncertainty. That makes you question a lot more things, and so that accelerates, wakes up nation a bit faster. So that had that impact. Always some uncertainty, trouble makes you rethink your life priority, what you are doing. So that had that effect.
SubhanAllah. So when you actually went to Australia, you were studying in Australia, how did you start to study Islamic finance? Where did this come from?
I originally came to Australia to do computer science. I loved those kinds of technology and stuff. And then somehow I could see that the way the society function, the way things are done, finance is central to this. And I say to my students, I remember traveling with my brother through Bosnia. It's just on the trip, one of the trips, and he used to work in a bank. And we would just muck around and you talk about stuff. And wherever we would go, him as a banker, he used to tell us, I have a client here and there. And I was thinking, like, we're going through the village, 5 people in the village, he's got a client. How's that even possible? How is bank so embedded in everything? And that was not even the biggest bank, right? And on the way, I heard once one politician called him because he was defaulting on the loan. And I started thinking, like, banking and finance is really embedded in everything that we are doing. Whether you are running a factory or bakery or want to build your own home, there is a bank. And that's when I learned 2 things about bankers, Number one, as I said, they have clients everywhere. And number 2 is that they know the best restaurants everywhere. And that's where they take their clients, always. So when I look at Islamic finance, I thought, look, this seems to be something that brings together helping your community, strengthening it, and at the same time, it's something that could have a very powerful focus to bring social cohesion and rebalance a lot of things that current banking sector is not doing. Because currently what we are seeing is entire economy is geared towards supporting the banking. And what Islamic way of thinking is really, it wants us, when we make whether you're talking about financial organization or any organization, they are there to support your lifestyle and to support real economy. And so I realized that, look, this is probably something interesting, connects a lot of bits and pieces, and that's how I started on that journey.
SubhanAllah. So you spoke about the nice restaurants. I've seen recently we're in Bursa now, but you was in Istanbul, trying out some of the restaurants there.
Beautiful.
So I wanted to ask you, because you've been speaking a lot lately about the importance of Turkey and the economy in Turkey and economy. I want to speak a bit about the Turkish economy, because a lot of people are worried, thinking the Turkish economy is not doing very well because the currency's, you know, halved against the dollar, or even more than halved against the pound, and they're looking at the inflation of Turkey. So I wanted to get your opinion about that, because I think you have some different opinions about that.
Well, look, I'm actually here to tell you, I'm working on a documentary about Turkish economy, and I've been researching for a while. I got the data and everything, and I noticed very early on that what the media narrative is and what's the numbers that I'm seeing are two different worlds. You look at the media, it's all against the president. He doesn't know what he's doing. Doesn't he know just simply increase interest rates, inflation will go away, and these kinds of things. And I knew that things cannot be as simple as that. And so I had a look, and what we are seeing in a quick sort of summary point, what we are seeing, Turkey as a country is coming from the period of time where lira was a little bit more overvalued. It was artificially propped by government in the past due to certain other policies, and it worked for a period of time when they were importing things. But what Turkey is doing now is going through the transformation where what they aim with the new economic model is actually to make country independent, independent from the world shocks in economy. And they actually recognize just a couple of years before pandemic that what we are witnessing in the world is end of the era of globalization, where people didn't care where their goods are coming from, whether they come from the end of the world or somewhere else. They were just concentrated on trade. So with the end of that globalization, more and more production focusing around the countries in the region, something called regionalization, and the global breakdown in supply chains. That was accelerated with pandemic. So what we have noticed is suddenly, if you try to get something from these other faraway countries, it's either you can't deliver it, there's no logistics, things shut down, economy shut down, or it's becoming suddenly very expensive to make things. And so Turkey wanted to become independent nation, not to depend on foreign capital, not to depend on who is producing what where. And so their plan was, President predicted that with his team very correctly, that for us to become one of the top 10 economies in the world, we need to focus on number one, production. You know, what can we produce? And that relates to your job, that attracts investments, and that is what brings up your exports. And so if we can focus on these things, then we can pretty much start that journey towards independence. And that's why they couldn't really lower the interest rates. They didn't shut down economy during the pandemic. They focused on that, and then they had fantastic rate. Last year, for example, 2001, their economy was the largest, fastest growing economy in the world, 11% from all G20 nations. Exports, the record exports we're seeing. Sure, inflation is affected with what's going on, but you see, if you observe the situation in Turkey, what you notice is that a lot of these shocks are a result, sure, partially globally there is a problem with inflation, but also there is some other shocks. Whenever President Trump would tweet, or when you have a Gazi protest or something's happening, everybody's in the media attack president, they think economy is dying, there is a problem, and then that also bring about inflation and the collapse of lira. So there are other externals effect, but you know, how do you fix rising prices? You can play with the monetary policies like what they all say, increase interest rates, but the best way is fixed supply of goods in your country. Make sure that what you are producing locally is available, and eventually in the long run that should balance itself. So that's basically quick summary of what's happening.
One of the things about Turkey is it's self-sufficient. You know, it provides its own goods, it has its own electronics, its food. You know, and this is a big contributor to the economy, right?
Yes.
For itself, and
these are main export. You look at automotive, electronics, textile, food. You know, they export 1,800 different agricultural products to 200 countries. So it's a big producer, and one of the main thing that drives inflation now is the cost of energy. With what is happening with the gas that is coming up, new supply increase in energy, abundant energy, cheap energy, we will see a major changes in the whole economy. Already it's competitive, already is producing, already is becoming the center of all supply chains in the world, right? But with abundance of energy and the new energy supplies that are coming, you will see it will be a major game changer.
So you're saying that. So from your perspective, you believe that the economy is doing well. The Turkish economy is doing well.
Economy is doing well in terms of what you want economy to do,
Yeah.
right? I'll give you an example. A few years ago, Tesla was not producing almost any car. So if you took a snapshot where Tesla is not producing car and you think, well, look, this is a bad company, why is anybody investing in Tesla or Amazon in the snapshot in time when they were building that? And that's what Turkey has done. Over the last 20 years, they built two things: industrial base to produce things and also infrastructure. And on top of that, they have great skilled and educated labor, highly skilled. So if you have industrial base and you have your infrastructure and you are already growing the fastest in the world and export is record, does it make sense that is this inflation that 80%? Are you really like some of the countries, I don't want to name them, that basically there is no government, no governance, the country is breaking down, nothing is being produced, they're living off IMF loans. And that country is doing better than Turkey.
No.
That doesn't make sense. So there are a lot of different factors that play into these things, and I think there is that short-term event. I mean that I'm looking to talk more about it in the documentary. Why is that psychology? What takes place? How certain things reinforce each other? How it comes to that inflation, and how I think eventually Turkey, inshallah, will get out of that.
I wanted to ask, maybe you'd be able to enlighten me on this. On the ground in everyday life in Turkey, people don't seem to be struggling how you would expect them to be in this time. Why is it? You'd expect queues for bread right now. It's with the economy literally, the currency at least halving to the pound and the dollar. Why is it not affecting the everyday life at that level?
I mean, you would see sometimes media would show there is a queue for a bread and then people are going there when the bread is at a discount and then everybody want to buy it. So they projected, everybody is just struggling even for the basics. I mean, it's a tough short-term situation. A lot of things that are happening are tough. Inflation is tough, and a lot of young people who are worried about their rent or bills. They don't necessarily look at a long-term picture, what's going to happen. So sometimes you could understand. But what you see in a lot of these countries, like when I go to Turkey or some of the countries that are worse off, like I would go to some of the Muslim countries where they are just above the level of poverty or maybe below. And then you see that country is not collapsing because there is something that society, the way that they work together, they support each other and they rely on each other, that calms down society. Obviously, this Islamic feeling and generosity of people is calming down population, and the support networks, you have friends, family. I think that plays a lot towards general psychology of the people.
SubhanAllah. So what are you expecting for Turkey in the next 5 to 10 years?
I expect already Turkey is now, if we look at the parity level, it's 11th largest economy in the world, 4th in Europe. I think in next less than 10 years, I would expect Turkey to be among the top 10 economies in the world, producing being independent in so many areas. Just for example, look at defense. They are already 80% defense independent, right? So they are producing everything. They are producing for strategic needs, and they are part of not just supply chain, but something called value chain, which is that they would even take some goods from the other country, raw material, and they would make it into the end product. So a value added sort of higher level production. So I believe that Turkey, in terms of economically, they are definitely leading. In terms of the neighboring relationships, look at what they're doing in Africa, for example, or in other countries. They are not just coming as a business partner, but a partner in many other areas of life, which I think gives different flavor, this more moral way of conducting your commerce.
Yeah.
So I think this is where Turkey can definitely lead, to show that we could have more human-centric way of running this economy.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing you pointed out. I mean, I've also noticed this myself in Africa. When you see how Turkey conduct themselves around Africa, it doesn't feel colonialistic. It's not like they're there just to take. You feel like they're actually helping as well, as not just from a business perspective, but also doing a lot of charity work there as well. They have showing a presence, especially an Islamic presence as well. I don't know if you've seen they've built big mosques around Africa, in Ghana and other places.
They are coming there as a brother. They are not coming there to colonize. They are not coming there with a superiority mentality. They are coming there as a brothers. And for example, one of my friends from Somalia was telling me that there was a situation where two tribes were having a war, like up to the point where they were killing each other, and then they brought a mediator from Turkey. They were able to sit down, work through these things, not like maybe some other so-called superpower who might arm one against the other, destroy. And so you see that genuine sort of desire to work for the betterment of the people. They would bring them to finish universities. They would open embassies in every, now that's a target, in every city in Africa. And so there is a much more long-term view of dealing with your neighbors.
So I would like to hear a bit of your perspective on the economy in the Islamic world in general. Different countries around the world, which ones are doing well, which ones, what advice would you have for certain countries, etc.
So if you look at the Islamic world, you have more than 50 majority Muslim countries, right? We are talking about now close to 2 billion people. And vast majority of those people are young people, below age of 25, vast majority. Even if you look at just the ages between something like 15 to 25, there is like 500-600 million of young people, right? So think of what these people are consuming, not just from the food, but from the culture, from the soft power and ideas that they are. Who is producing things we consume or ideas that we are consuming? So sometimes when we are talking about halal economy, right? And this is where a little bit my criticism to Islamic banking and finance industry is that there is a lot of focus on the end of supply chain, which is the transaction okay? At the bank, did I write in a proper way, buy and sell this house or invest in anything? This is the end of supply chain. But what about beginning and the middle, right? When you have a situation where halal economy, whether the food or anything else in halal economy, where you as a Muslim, you are reduced to consumer, and someone else who doesn't believe in those principles, he is the producer of all of your economy. It doesn't exactly sit very well, right? If the main stakeholder in the industry is not a producer, then that doesn't make sense. So my call is that Islamic finance and banks, institutions, money, right, halal money, should be engaged in all stages of that supply chain from beginning, when you are starting the company, when you are starting the production, transporting anything, financing that whole thing, to the debt transaction at the end. It's great to see everybody else interested in halal, But top 5 producers of meat, for example, halal meat, none of them are Muslim countries. I mean, Australia is the second. I'm very happy to see Australia doing well, right? Australia is exporting, there are 400 businesses from Australia exporting into the Middle East, halal products. Great, right? But that cannot be the number one and everything, you understand?
Yeah.
Where are we in our own economy, right? So that is something that I would love to see change. And this is going back to what we were talking about Turkey, is that you need to be a producer. You need to be upper hand, right? So the Prophet ﷺ is coming from Mecca, where he's economically boycotted, and he's going to Medina, and he sets up the market and the institutions that strengthen our way of life, because that's what is the point of business, of economy. It's to strengthen and support your lifestyle, so that you can produce what you need, and so that becomes source of strength, and then it filters in the rest of your life. And unfortunately today, a lot of Muslim countries, they are not self-sufficient. Many of them cannot even feed themselves. And not just Muslim countries, but a lot of countries in this region. Like around Turkey, 4-hour flight, you have 1.3 billion people just in this region. Okay, that is a region where you have countries like Sri Lanka, for example. President just ran away because the people are starving. They cannot feed themselves. In Lebanon, I was just reading the news. The guy entered into the bank, robbing the bank because they don't want to release his money, and people are chanting. They are happy that he's doing that. They are so fed up with the banks and government, and there is a total collapse. Pakistan just took another IMF loan, $1 billion. What's the strategy? You're going to take that money, and not just Pakistan, many of other countries. You're going to take that money, you're going to buy food from someone else, and in 1 year you will have no money and no food, but you will have a debt. What's the 10-year plan? Yeah. Right? And that's why I think what's happening in this country is example for this entire region. You simply have to start thinking, how do I sustainably for example, produce the things that I need, that are important. Because when pandemic comes, or there is a war or a tension, people stop producing. You're not going to get any food. You're not going to get, even in Australia, when pandemic started, we couldn't get the masks, we couldn't get the machine, technology, cameras for the Zoom, everything was coming from China, and we were sending just money to China. Now, people are starting to reevaluate, does that make sense? And in the times of tension, you want things that are produced to be close to your country. You don't want things to come from far away.
See, you're speaking on a very, big level, the government level, on a country level. How can we also think about the individual as a Muslim and our families? What should we be doing, to prepare ourselves, strengthen ourselves as well?
Right, that's right. So at the individual level, obviously there are different kind of people. Some people might just be concerned finding the career, next career. Maybe somebody is engineer or a doctor, or I just want to find a business to work, and then maybe I have a little bit of saving, and then maybe I invest, or just living like that. I think there are a lot of people like that. Let's say there is maybe 2/3 or more people who are just like that. They want to find a job, right? And they just living their thing. I think amongst them, other group of people that will be very critical are the people who are more entrepreneurial in their mind. So he is the same engineer, but he's thinking, I'm here in Bursa, how can I start a business here that will employ another 5 people, right? Another 5 of those engineers. And so suddenly, maybe that business might grow, might be international, or another young man, he finished business school, he thinking, this is a great manufacturing city, very strong automotive industry here. Next city is very strong textile, another city is something else. How can I leverage this skilled workforce, close relationship to the strategic location between Asia and Europe and Africa, Middle East, to manufacture something that, like Europe now not going to take any more stuff from China, right? Because they are worried what's happening with Taiwan. They don't want another Russia-Ukraine conflict where they are running away from the country. So if you are a European businessman and in China, stuck in China, you're thinking, in case of any problem with China, my business is toast.
Yeah.
I need to move the production.
It's happened.
It's already
Over
happening.
COVID, yeah.
Already it's happening.
I know people that the business has gone bump.
That's right. You have a major European businesses running away from China, Russia, these places, and they're investing heavily here. Very friendly to set up business. You have very close proximity to anywhere, excellent infrastructure. So if you're already here or you're thinking to do some business here or anywhere, you're thinking, how can I engage in sort of more productive side? How can I start a business? If you're doing finance, how can I structure some way of financing these businesses and, leverage that side of. So you're thinking that you start something or invest in someone or support somebody who's starting something. Right? Not everybody is that sort of starter of the startup, but you help somebody. Rather than putting $5,000 in the stock market and buy money and you're not really doing anything with that, right? Your friends might got idea, they want to do something, let's collect the money, start something. Open coffee shop, do anything, but don't just think I need to get a job especially in this environment. If 5% of young people just establish businesses that employ 5 other people, 5 employ 5, that's 6 people. So 5 times 6, that's 30. That's 30% of young people. That's basically your unemployment in most of Muslim countries, which is 30-40%. And you don't know what's going to happen as a result of that. That company tomorrow could be, if you have that in hundreds and thousands of companies like that, they might grow. You might have a 10 company that will redefine the entire way business is done in this country. They will be your next, whatever, Teslas and Ubers and Amazons. So you have to tap into what you have here, which is excellent opportunities for production and for export. And then the rest is just up to you, really, just to find your niche.
So, encouraging Muslims to get involved in business and being entrepreneurs, but it's important, the most important thing from the beginning is to have knowledge of the Islamic principles of how to do business, because a lot of people, sometimes they get involved in business, and then once they, become successful, then they start thinking, well, have I actually been doing it in the right way? So before people get involved in business, what are some of the principles, Islamic things they should be thinking about so they can make sure that they're doing it not just according to the legal rules of the country, but also so that they're doing it legally in Islam as well?
That's right. Number one rule to think about is a general when you run a business. A lot of people when they start business, they're thinking accounting, taxation, or what's halal and haram and this and that. Like, number one thing, when you're starting business, you need to start thinking, what's the purpose of business? Purpose of the business is to solve some problem, to help somebody in something. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you are those who help others the most. Now, you can help people by, for example, making a product that's very helpful. Umbrella. You make umbrella. It's very useful. I bought umbrella the other day. It was I was saying, alhamdulillah, for umbrella. Solved the problem. Now that umbrella, because I paid some money to the merchant, paid his salary. That directly helps him support his family, right? That supports the business that made that umbrella. Now, person who transport that umbrella also was paid. Person who supply raw material to the manufacturer got paid. You see, all of these people are, because I bought one umbrella that helped me, it helped entire chain of people who are involved in that production. If you want to tackle poverty, create the jobs, create the economy. The best way to solve the poverty is through having economy where people are engaging in the work, honest, work where they don't have to beg from anybody. They're supporting themselves. On top of that, once you do that efficiently, and Allah bless you with some surplus and saving, then you can take extra money that you have left and then give it to the people who cannot support themselves. So you see how if you have that mindset, where on one hand you're solving the real problems in society, whether you look, I'm here having the internet here, we have a camera, we have a TV, we have a chairs, we have a clothes, we were driven by cars, right? Somebody built this house. All of these things are produced by people who do it commercially. And it's excellent, fantastic. And so combining these things, once you start thinking, I'm producing something, solving real needs, consciously you know, most of people, Muslims know, what is it that you shouldn't be doing? Any kind of cheating, any kind of deceiving people, something that is not ethical. You'll find if your gut feeling is there telling you something is dodgy here, right? You know, everybody knows when they're doing something that is not right. As we say, the sin is something you don't want people to find out, right? Because we know if people knew about this, would they be happy? Or as they say, the front, if this was written in the newspaper tomorrow about you, would you be proud of yourself, right? And so once you engage in your business, obviously, it's very easy to contact somebody who has a bit more experience and ask specific questions. Is this the way I can sell, buy? Is this the right way? Like I have many courses on the transactions, on buying and selling, on commerce, on all of these things. So these things you can buy, which is why even Sahih Bukhari, when it starts, it doesn't immediately start with the transaction piece. It starts with a piece where Abdurrahman ibn Auf comes to the market and he asks, comes to Medina and he asks, where is the market? You know? Or Abu Huraira, who is saying that average day in Medina, people used to buy and sell, and you know, they were engaged in commerce. And so these two narrations tells us that on average day in Medina, people are busy working in the market and everything. And Abdurrahman ibn Auf coming as a refugee, refusing charity and said, where is the market where I can be self-sufficient and work for myself? So you see, even from the book of narrations about business, it starts with that mentality, mindset, that you want to be engaged. And then transactions are easy. And so I see a lot more Muslims who are concerned, who want to know what's allowed, what's not allowed. These usually things not very difficult, especially today, to learn about these kind of things.
So I know that you've been researching a lot about Islamic economics, and tell us a bit about your research that you've been doing the past few years.
So for a while I've been researching transactions and bits and pieces in a fragmented way, riba and haram this and transaction that and banking. Then I started expanding on what is the actual framework, how does this all sit together. Usually, you know, like these days, engineers, or you know, when you study a grammar or learn language, or there is always some kind of a system where you learn number 1, 2, 3. And I thought, is there a way where we could do the same with Islamic economy? And so I remember one of my teachers a long time ago, he told me a story of a shepherd and what the shepherds do in their life. And basically, as you know, the Prophet ﷺ said, all of you are like shepherds, meaning you have some responsibility that you are in charge of. And so the job of the shepherd, and I grew up in the area where I remember behind my house seeing those shepherds, and exactly it made sense when he said it, what the job is. He said, they take care of the weak ones. That's number one job. They gather, you know, and then they carry them, the weak lamb, you know. That's number one job. The second job is when they see those that scatter around, they gather them around themselves. That's the second job, gathering the lost ones. And the third job that shepherds do is they lead the strong ones toward the green area. They have a force, they can see things far away, and they can identify opportunities, so they take them in that direction. I heard that story a long time ago, and one day I was sitting and it just came to me that this exactly could fit Islamic economic system. You know, when we are talking about capitalism, socialism, I was always thinking, like, people always ask me, is Islamic economic system more capitalistic or social? Is it welfare state or free market state? And I would look at think, and I always thought these people are missing the point. These are different systems. You can't describe Islam with relation to another system that has a different way of looking at everything. Even if there is something that looks similar to you, right? The objectives of the system and the underlying framework is completely different, even if some things look the same or similar or whatever. And so I try to develop the framework that would frame Islamic economic system. And alhamdulillah, I realized that when you are talking about helping the weak one, that is in economic sense, how do you help the weak one who can't help themselves? It's about distribution of wealth. And a principle of Islamic economy found in Quran is that wealth should not be concentrated only in the hand of few, but it should circulate, right? So that's a number one principle. And how does wealth circulate in Islamic economy? It's different than socialist ideas and their way of taxation and stuff like that. But you have certain ways. Zakat is one way that wealth circulates. Sadaqah, institution like waqf, even the way inheritance work. So Islam legislates exactly how the wealth is to circulate in society. Then the second piece came to me was very interesting, gathering the scattered ones. Gathering the scattered one is basically watching the borders. What you mentioned before, how do I know what I'm doing is halal or not? And that is about rules and regulations, which says that business and economy is to be conducted here. Earn your livelihood in this area. Don't go there. And what is there beyond these borders is haram things. Cheating people, engaging in interest-based transactions. Anything that is deceiving people and benefit and exploiting them, right? And so what is that all about? Is gathering the scattered ones, which is about the protection of the wealth. So you have number one, distribution of the wealth. Number two, you have protection of the wealth through the frame of prohibiting people from going into these prohibited zones to conduct. So incentives to do bad things are reduced. And then the third principle, which is not talked enough, which we touched before, which is leading the strong one. What is the leading the strong one? Is basically a wealth creation, where you are producing things that, what is the wealth in general? It's what you can do, things you can make with your own things. And so when you look at Islamic contracts of partnership as a musharaka, for example, you are allowed to negotiate profit rate. In fact, me and you going to business, it's okay that I give you more profit, and if you're gonna work harder as an incentive, okay. But when it comes to the risk, we share the risk based on how much money we put, let's say, together. So we see even in the basic contract, you are incentivizing work, okay, and being self-sufficient, being the upper hand. That's something that is good in Islam. You want to be in that situation. And so when you put these all three together, suddenly you start getting the framework. And when you compare it to the capitalism and socialism, what I started noticing, number one, second pillar, rules and regulation. Both systems have no specific rules and regulation that would say this is wrong or this is right. For example, they would both argue that global financial crisis, financial speculation, where we turn the entire stock market into the gambling. So both systems would, for example, look at the stock market and global financial crisis, and they would say, "Oh, this is a terrible. How did this could happen?" Right? But okay, what's the underlying cause? You could create these products out of nothing, okay? Then you can speculate on them, bet on them, whether markets go up and down, you have instrument to profit. Even when market is going down, you can profit. That doesn't make sense. This house falling down, how can I profit from that? But in financial world, you can profit because you can take a bet on any direction of the market. And so this creates different incentives where you leverage and you have toxic debt, everything is financialized, debt is going like crazy, right? And so you look at that and you say, okay, how do we fix that? They don't have a way. The socialists might say, well, tax all of these. So they're just concerned about getting money from this game. All right, let's have a bit of action there. Capitalism, free market, say, well, market will sort itself out. Well, you know, if you incentivize, what you incentivize will grow. It's not going to sort itself out. On the top of that, when everything collapses, they give funding to these banks and stimulus and so on. So there is no real, as one of the economists said during financial crisis, you know, they are all capitalists when it comes to making money, but they are all socialists when it comes to spreading the losses to the people.
Yes.
And so we see that that pillar, both of these systems, communism or socialism and capitalism, they fail. They don't have clear rules when it comes to distribution. Again, misbalance. There is no clarity. How do you distribute? What you take? What you cannot? And actually, capitalism fail even more. But the biggest failure in this end you see in the wealth creation. How do you incentivize? Islam wants private enterprise, you know, the business to thrive, wants to have that freedom to contract and so on. And this is one of the reasons why West was more superior than the East, because they allow for that freedom. But Islam channels those incentives and freedom towards productive purposes, so that you don't become a bright mind, but rather than engaging in positive work, you are looking at a product that create no benefit for society. So when you look at all in all, you see miracle of Islam. You know, somebody asked me that, but the Prophet ﷺ never talked about this and that, and it doesn't matter. If you truly understand the principles, you can trace them down to any of the most sophisticated products that you are seeing, any development, anything. So I think for me, looking at that, the whole system, and then looking from the transaction to personal to the governmental level, at the end of the day, you have situation where when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, you know, and they started that whole market in Medina, and that became a source of strength of the Muslim. You could see the Muslim community that is strong, able to take care of itself, and that was something that allow Muslims to be who they are, unlike when they cannot do anything and they're depending. And so Muslims live like that. They would spread Islam, they would influence, they would support themselves, and others they were great force. And I wish today Muslim can be equally beneficial. You know, how do we run a lot of things? How do you run a hospital in a different way? So this idea of a more moral economy. How do you run a business? How do you run anything? How do you run a country? How do you become a good neighbor? Especially in these days where everything is about which superpower is going to dominate over others, and everybody is scared because it means that they will exploit others. You know, how do you run Islamically, morally, based on these universal values, entire country, and deal with your neighbors? I think the world really needs something like that. And unfortunately, not many countries are thinking to challenge the status quo, which is back to this topic. When President Erdogan said, I'm not going to increase the interest rates, everybody was against him because everybody is thinking the same. I was watching IMF at that time just the other day, and you know, the finance minister in one of, I think, Nigeria, she was saying, oh, we're going to do this and that, basically refinance debt, and that means, you know, when you have a debt and refinance, that's going to be compounded more interest. And IMF was saying, well, that's exactly what you should be doing. It's like people forgot to think for themselves strategically. What's the best for my country? Or if IMF says something for me is best, then I just take it. If all the conventional mindset say something, I take it. Like, wake up, think for yourself. And that for me is story of Turkey. Turkey now is showing us what really economic leadership is all about. You know, just like at the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, you know, sure, some years you need to be a bit more shrewd and you need to be saving, and there is a short-term squeeze, but there is something happening behind a scene that you need to get ready and prepare. And you know, having a president who goes, it would be the easiest thing if he would just go and do what everybody was saying. But how many presidents fight for their country independence and go against the tide to do what they know it must be done? Like, just that factor, you know, doing for your people what needs to be done is for me fascinating. And the reason for this is, I think one of the things is that when the President Erdogan came, he came in power. He was not catapulted. He didn't come from elite position as a professor or a lobby group or something like that. He came from the street. You know, he earned through his work and sweat, he earned his stripes. So what he's doing is for the best thing he can do for his nation.
Well, it's a great example you gave of the shepherd, you know, because the Prophet said that all the prophets were shepherds as well. So, you know, when you give this example as well.
Yeah.
And it's not just about finance, but all aspects of our life, you know, going back to the Quran and the Sunnah.
Yeah.
And
building your country, protecting your people, even as a man, being Qawam, you know, somebody who is observing what's going on, he's alert, aware. You know, just that institution of you watching what's happening, you are present, you're not naive, nobody can fool you, right? So that confidence, that strength, you know, that you give to your people, to your society, building yourself, I think that's something that I look more and more to see amongst our people and countries on different levels, from business people to people in government in charge, that they really discharge their duties as a Muslims.
Jazakallah khair. Is there any final comments you'd like to mention just before we...
Thank you very much. If you like to find out, we're going to be making a documentary about economy here in Turkey, and inshallah, if you go to my website, you can join newsletter, and I'll let you know when it is out, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. We're looking forward to seeing that. And
Thank you
thank
very
you for coming and sharing some of your thoughts.
My pleasure. All the
Jazakallah
best. Allah reward you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
إنك لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء